tragic loss of 10,000 rounds of ammunition and about 3,400 dead birds, the Great Emu War of 1932 is one that left a lasting embarrassment on Australians forever. So what happened? To understand how this happened, we have to go across the world over to America in 1929. Do we know what happened in 1929? The stock market in New York completely crashed. Banks would not give out any loans, everything is down. So there's a major economic downturn in America right now. On top of that, the Great Dust Bowl of 1929 also happened, turning 19 US states into complete fields of dust. So this completely wiped out the agriculture industry in America, causing a huge famine. So how do we combat this crisis? The US imposes tariffs on all foreign imports. Now that no one is spreading the economic downturn globally. Fun fact about Australia, it's an island. So how do they make all of their money? They export things. So now that no one is buying, the economy is suffering a lot, specifically the agriculture business. Fun fact about that, after World War I, what happened to all the veterans? They became farmers, which was all great, and now we have this economic downturn, which is not great. So now they're all left the farms to go work for the cities. So now that we know what's happening in Australia and the rest of the world, how does this relate to emus? Well, breeding season for emus is in May and June in Australia, and after that's over, they migrate to the coast. In the early 1930s, there were 20,000 emus migrating. So, with a lot of farmers gone, there was a lot of lush and wet farmland, basically a sanctuary for all emus. So, emus really like to trample on and eat and basically destroy anything they can on a farm. So now these farmers have to deal with 20,000 birds who are trampling their crops, and they're already struggling. This cost them millions more pounds in lost crops and damages. So in 1932, the farmers had had enough. They decided to go to the Australian government. They're going to go to the Department of Agriculture, right? No ma'am. They go to the military. Yeah. Specifically, George Pierce, who at the time was the Minister of Defense. Pierce had a great plan of killing a bunch of birds, so he proposed this, saying that killing thousands of birds would be very successful, it would be great for PR, and they're good target practice. So Australia unofficially went to war with their own national bird. Now we arrive at the very first battle. Major G.P.W. Meredith and 2 men were sent out to hunt the emus in Western Australia. They were given 10,000 rounds of ammunition and 2 machine guns. Pierce also sent out a camera crew to accompany them and take pictures because he wanted everyone to see how amazing Australia is. On November 2nd of 1932, the 3-member team employed a formation tactic against a group of 50 emus. However, they failed to account for the fact that emus are literally known for their ability to run at super high speeds. So what happens when a bunch of soldiers shoot at birds? They run. This mission was a complete fail. So back to the drawing board, and by November 4th, the men were back out hunting the emus. They laid out an ambush at their big water source, which is a great idea, but then thousands of birds came, and one of their only 2 guns jammed up. So the birds scattered once again. After the 3rd day of this project, only about 30 emus had been killed. Farmers quickly discovered that their military was not very effective, so they took to herding them themselves, using trucks and whatever they could to get them off their farm. Major G.P.W. said, hey, that's a really good idea. So he had one of his troops drive a truck, and then the other went on top with a machine gun and started shooting at all the emus. This is great, but emus can run very fast, and on that terrain, they're much faster than the trucks. And a truck actually crashed after hitting an emu. So they quickly realized that emus also have very tough hides, and a single bullet from a machine gun barely did any damage. So by November 8th, reporters had a field day with publicizing the very embarrassing story of the failure of the emu war. Members of the Australian House of Representatives even joked that if anyone deserves a medal, it's the emus because they've won literally every battle so far. So the team withdrew. However, the problem had not been solved. After a report that 300 emus in total had been killed, Pierce decided to redeploy his troops on November 12th. And in the time frame of November 12th to December 10th, about 3,400 emus were killed. Considering how awfully this war has gone, many question that number. But even with that amount of birds being killed, the ratio of rounds per emu was 10. So 10 rounds for one emu. So the Great Emu War ended in 1932 with a victory going to the emus. They continued to wreak havoc on farmers all around. But the government introduced a bounty system, which actually proved a lot more helpful than the war was. So this whole situation was an embarrassing loss for Australia. And it taught them that even when you think you're going to be successful, you might not. So let's be prepared.